Double bag alert, double bag alert, double bag alert, folks. That's right. We got a loaded episode, okay, full of twists and turns, ups and downs. You already know how these episodes go, okay? We got a bag alert on top of trades, okay? Man, oh man, the trade deadline continues to never fails us, folks. I called it. I said at least two blockbuster trades were going to happen. We had one. Well, two if you want to count Zadarius, but I only count one with the Marshawn Lattimore. But who cares all about that, okay? Because guess what? Jonathan Cooper gets paid. Chuba Hubbard gets paid. Baron Browner is traded to the Cardinals. Dennis Allen gets fired. The Raiders lose, and in doing so, clean the offensive staff completely. The Cowboys are cooked, hibachi style. The Commanders continue to win. The Bears are struggling, and I mean struggling. You would think that it is hibernation season for them, folks. The Ravens finally get back into the winning column. The Eagles barely get a win. The Chiefs and Bucs, we have to talk about it, even though Thursday Night Football happened. Maybe we'll talk about that as well. Trade deadline recap and gut check time. Yeah, that's right. Gut check. It's time that we have some uncomfortable conversations about where certain teams are at this point in the season, okay? All of this and more on the 47th episode of the Football Junkies podcast, okay? I am your host with the most, okay? I'm your chief Bagrodamus. I'm your chief head of the table, okay? Chief bag meteorologist, okay? But most importantly, I am your GM who currently is not on a team right now, but don't you worry about it, okay? Don't you worry your little mind about that, okay? Because guess what? I'm all these things and more. But most importantly, I am your host, Kale. You already know what I'm getting ready to say. So guess what? I know it's been a while, but guess what? It's time to give you guys the football fix that you guys need before this week, because we're going to have some loaded games this week, and I cannot wait. So guess what? On three, 1, 2, 3, let's lock in. All right, folks, let's get into the meat and potatoes of everything that is going on in the league. And let me tell you something. A lot has happened in this week alone for the league, okay? So let's just go into everything. Let's not waste any more time, okay? Jonathan Cooper, outside linebacker for the Broncos, gets paid 4 years, $60 million. $33 million guaranteed. That's around ballpark, around maybe 14 to 15 million a year, depending on the incentives and all those different things. Okay, now when we look at his stats for 2023, 70 tackles, 8.5 sacks, 1 interception. Okay, this is what I will say. For somebody who was a 7th round pick to be as productive as he has been with the Broncos definitely says a lot. And, you know, he has definitely emerged as one of the bright spots on that Broncos defense. Outside of Patrick Surtain, you could probably make a strong case that he probably is one of the most important people on that defense. And he continues to show it. And, you know, if we're being real here, this is a deal that is somewhat of a team-friendly deal. This isn't a deal that, you know, it's going to break the bank or it's going to, you know, put them in a bad spot and as the years go down the road. No, it's a fairly really good deal. You take care of a young player while at the same time, you know, it doesn't necessarily break the bank, which is great. Because again, the Broncos are in a spot where, you know, they're going to have a lot of cap space moving forward. And that's going to allow them to continue to build onto this team because, again, let's be real here. The Broncos are a really good team. That defense has been playing phenomenal. Okay, and mind you, this is a defense that doesn't have a whole bunch of talent outside of PS2, their safety, and then Jonathan Cooper. Now, if there's anybody else that I'm not thinking of, my apologies to you, no disrespect to you, OG. But, you know, the Broncos are in a really good spot. And, you know, as much flack as we for the handling of Russell Wilson, sometimes it has to get ugly before it gets good. And now they're in a good space, and as long as they maintain this consistency, they will be able to be a problem for the Chiefs moving forward. Now, moving on to Chuba Hubbard, all right? Running back for the Carolina Panthers. He inked a 4-year, $33.2 million deal that has a max value of $37.2 million, okay? That's about $15 million, give or take, fully guaranteed. So he'll be making about $8 to $9 million a year, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. I don't have my calculator with me. But when we look at these stats, though, okay, 238 attempts for 902 rushing yards, 3.8 rushing yards per carry, 5 touchdowns, and 21 rushes of 10 plus yards or more. Now, for him to be as productive as he has been in the situation that the Panthers have been in, definitely says a lot. Chuba Hubbard has been doing his thing. He has been balling. And mind you, he's doing this behind a very lackluster offensive line, if we can be honest here. And, for him to do this, it's only up from here. It really is. It's not a deal that's going to break the bank. It's not a deal that, they're going to have to restructure, as the years go by and whatnot. No, this is a very team-friendly deal. The running back market is fairly, I wouldn't say average, but it's very low, right? Outside of, the big names, the Christian McCaffreys, the Alvin Kamara's, the Jonathan Taylors, the Derrick Henrys of the world, everybody under that really isn't making a whole lot of money. So you're taking care of a position that, the team must value a whole lot, while at the same time, you're making sure that you are not overpaying for somebody. So all in all, great situation for them. Now, let's get into this Baring-Browning trade before we get into the other trades. Okay, so Baring-Browning, former Denver Broncos pass rusher, was traded from the Broncos to the Cardinals. The Cardinals, of course, received Baring-Browning, and the Broncos received a 6th-round pick. Now, when we look at this, Baring-Browning at this point really didn't have a spot with the Broncos, especially with Jonathan Cooper being as productive as he has been. And so the best thing to do is to just send him into another place where he would be a starter and that he can have a chance to be, whatnot. Honestly speaking here, it's a good situation because, again, the Cardinals have been looking for a productive pass rusher, for a while. And they were able to find it without having to give up a whole lot to get it, while at the same time, a young piece that you can build off of, right? Because, again, this Cardinals team, low-key, has been playing fairly well. They have. They actually surprised me. If you would have told me that the Cardinals would be playing as well as they have played, I would have called you a liar. And, hats off to the head coach for doing what he's doing. I mean, they're playing well. They're playing well on both sides. And again, this is the recipe for these young teams to be ultra competitive, not only in their division, but, in the league as a whole. You have a young team, young core. You keep things fairly low as far as spending and, trading for people and whatnot. And you just build off of that. And so far, they're in the right direction. Now, they had to go through some bumpy roads. Yes, they did. They did have to go through, a little bit of turmoil, but guess what? They're on the other side of it, and it's only up from here at this point. As long as they maintain, the course. Now, if they try to go left with it, then that's when you're going to start to see, the worst of it. Now, on to one of the first games that we have to cover, and that is the Saints versus the Panthers. Okay, so before we get into all the stuff related to Dennis Allen, we'll go there when we go there. Okay, so Bryce Young was 16 for 26, 171 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick, 6.6 yards per attempt, and a 61.5 completion percentage, okay? Chuba Hubbard, 15 attempts for 72 rushing yards, 4.8 rushing yards per carry, 2 rushes of 10-plus yards or more. Jatavion Sanders, 5 targets for 4 receptions, 87 receiving yards, 21.8 receiving yards per carry. Derek Carr, 18 for 31, 236 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 7.6 yards per attempt, and a 58.1 completion percentage, okay? Alvin Kamara, 29 rushes of 155 rushing yards, 5.3 rushing yards per carry, and 3 rushes of 10-plus yards or more. Taysom Hill, 5 targets for 4 receptions, 41 receiving yards, 10.3 receiving yards per reception. Now, when we look at this, This was definitely a game where, if the Saints would have won, it would have tamped down the flames, right? It would have tamped down a lot of the outside noise that was starting to, grow and grow and grow, basically because, at this point, one could make a case that Dennis Allen, was basically playing for his job. And, for him to lose to the Panthers, it's not good. The Saints have lost 7 games straight. 7 games. 7 games. That is unacceptable. And I get it. This team doesn't really have the best roster. I get all of that. But still, to lose 7 straight is unacceptable. That is the reason why, the owner decided that she wanted to go in a different direction and fire Dennis Allen. But before we get into her quote, I'm just going to read to you his coaching record since 2022, right? So here we go. In 2022, 7 wins, 10 losses. In 2023, 9 wins, 8 losses. In 2024, he was 2-7. He lost, and as I just said, he lost 7 straight. If we're being real here, the only good record was probably 2023, and even then, that's not even really good. It's only good now because we're about to hit an 18-week season. That's the only reason why. Outside of that, these are not really good records. These are not. These are unacceptable records. And granted, for the longest time, the Saints were, that dominant team in their division. And as time progressed, and, once Drew Brees retired, they didn't properly prepare, for Drew Brees, to retire. Let alone did they really prepare to, to do whatever they needed to do once Sean Payton decided that he wanted to leave the Saints. And granted, I get it. It's hard to, go behind a legendary, head coach and try to find your own way. I get all of that. But, this was a game where you could sort of, have some momentum and sort of regain your locker room. Because at this point, it's probably safe to say that, a lot of those players, especially the veteran players, have checked out mentally. Like they're over the season. They just want to get through with the season, get their money, go on vacation, and figure out what they want to do, with their career moving forward. That's just where they are. And, it sucks. It sucks for someone like a Cam Jordan who, he's been there this entire time, and this is probably the lowest low that he's been a part of. Like, this is probably one of the worst teams. And, once you lose your veterans in the locker room, that's it. And you can tell by his body language when if you guys haven't seen the video, there's a video circling around of Cam Jordan walking. He's just trying to get some fresh air, just trying to, calm his nerves. And Derek Carr is running behind him trying to talk to him and whatnot. And you can just see in his face that he's just like, he's done. He's over it. He doesn't want to, he doesn't want to continue to go through the sense and the foolishness that is this team right now. And, it sucks. It really does. But let's get into this statement and continue to move forward. So this is what she says, and I quote, talking about Dennis Allen, okay? He is highly regarded within the NFL. He has been extremely loyal and professional, and most importantly, an excellent football coach for us. All of this makes today very tough for me and our organization. However, this decision is something that I felt we needed to make at this time. I wish nothing but the best in the future for Dennis and his family. He will always be considered in the highest regard by me and everyone within our organization. That is a statement to where basically saying you were okay, but it's time we go a separate way because this is not working. This is not working. We're not winning. We're not being competitive. It's just not, it's not good for business. And it shows. It shows. If you are a Saints fan right now, especially a season ticket holder Saints fan, you are probably wanting to sell a lot of your tickets because there's no point in really going to the games. It really isn't. And if I'm Alvin Kamara, I'm low-key sort of second-guessing my decision about signing that extension. Now, granted, he probably wanted to retire a Saint, and that's perfectly fine. I get that, but bro, the amount of talent that you had, if you went on one of these winning teams, man, you would be putting up cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs type numbers, man. But again, I can't, have a conversation with Alvin Kamara. So let's get into this Raiders and Bengals game, okay? Because this game, man, what can you say about this game? This game was a bad game for the Raiders. But Raiders be the Raiders, right? But let's get into these stats, okay? So Gardner Minshew was 10 for 17, 124 passing yards, 7.3 yards per attempt, and a 58.8 completion percentage, okay? Desmond Ridder, 11 for 16, 74 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 4.6 yards per attempt, and a 68.6 completion percentage. Now, you're probably wondering, why am I listing Desmond Ridder? Because Desmond Ridder came in for Gardner Minshew after he was benched, okay? We're just going to leave it there. Now, Alexander Madison, 9 attempts for 36 rushing yards, 4 rushing yards per carry, okay? Jacoby Myers, 11 targets for 8 receptions, 105 receiving yards, 13.1 receiving yards per reception. Joe Burrow, 27 for 39, 251 passing yards, 5 touchdowns, 1 pick, 6.4 yards per attempt, and a 69.2 completion percentage, okay? Mike Gesicki, 6 targets for 5 receptions, 100 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, 20 receiving yards per reception. Chase Brown, 27 attempts for 120 rushing yards, 4.4 rushing yards per carry, and 2 rushes of 10-plus yards or more. Now, when we look at this, the Bengals are starting to, show that they are that dark horse that people are going to have to be concerned about. Joe Burrow, as of this point, is probably having statistically his best year. Okay, you're talking about somebody that is throwing multiple touchdowns in one game. I'm talking about 2 and 3, maybe even more touchdowns a game just to win. And a lot of that has to do with, the defense being, crappy and whatnot. So there's more weight put on his shoulders. But hey, they paid him the money that they paid him because they believe that he could do this. And so far, he's been balling out. As of right now, if we can be honest here, I think, and this is just my opinion, I can definitely be wrong, I think the MVP race is definitely between Lamar, Jared Goff, Joe Burrow, and Derrick Henry. I think those are the ones that right now, those are like the runner-ups for MVP. Now, can someone like Josh Allen, could he sneak in there? You probably, most likely. Could there be other people that could, sneak in there as well? Yes, but for right now, it's definitely Lamar, Joe Burrow, Jared Goff, and Derrick Henry. 100% of the way. Now, for the Raiders, this Raiders team is not good. And, it sucks for someone like a Max Crosby because, you have basically given your whole career to a team that really has not been competitive for a very long time. Outside of that 1 year where they had Derek Carr and Darren Waller and Josh Jacobs and, Hunter Renfrow and company, outside of that, they really have not been that good. And, it's just bad. It's a bad situation for Max Crosby. And I would have thought that, the Raiders would have just, traded him and put him in a different situation. Not necessarily sending him to the Chiefs, but you could have just sent him out of the conference in its entirety. Sent him to the Lions. And you could have gotten probably a king's ransom for it. Honestly speaking here. Like, let's be real here. This Raiders team on both sides of the ball is not competitive. That offense, let me tell you the offensive rankings for the Raiders, okay? So their passing offense is ranked 19th in the league, okay? They have a 63.7 pass play percentage, 203.3 passing yards per game, which is the equivalent of 5.2 passing yards per play and 9 touchdowns. That is not good, folks. That is below average, if we can be real here. Now, when you look at their rushing offense, it is dead last. Dead last in this league. 76.9 rushing yards per game, which translates to 3.5 rushing yards per play and 7 touchdowns. It's not good. It's not good. And that is exactly why Antonio Pierce decided that he was going to clean house for the offense. And in doing so, he has fired offensive coordinator Luke Getsy, O-line coach James Craig, and quarterback coach Rich Scarangelo. If I'm pronouncing your last name, my apologies. Don't mean to do it on purpose. This is what I will say. The Raiders have a lot of big decisions that they have to make moving forward, not only for, positions, but as well as coaching. Because at this point, what is the bright spot outside of Max Crosby? Please, can somebody tell me what is the bright spot for the Raiders? There is none. This Raiders team has been playing very mediocre. And if you are, an owner of this team, well, not even an owner, but if you're a shareholder of this team, you should be disappointed to know that you put your money into this team and this team has not done anything. You got the big stadium, you got, all these different types of things. You have loyal fans that continue to show up for these games, knowing that this team is not able to compete. I guarantee you right now, if you had the Raiders and the Panthers go up against one another, I guarantee you the Panthers would probably put up 30 points on the Raiders' head. And that's sad. That is honestly 100% sad. And if you are a quarterback for next year's draft, you better think about it, because if you wind up with the Raiders, best believe that rookie year is going to be hell. Now, on to another game that we have to talk about, and that is the Cowboys versus the Falcons. Yes, I already know. I already know. So let's just get into everything before we talk about all the other stuff, okay? So, Dak Prescott, 18 for 24, 133 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 5.5 yards per attempt, and a 75 completion percentage. Cooper Rush, 13 for 25, 115 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 4.6 yards per attempt, and a 52 completion percentage. Jake Ferguson, 10 targets for 7 receptions, 71 receiving yards, and 10.1 receiving yards per reception. Rico Dowd, 12 attempts for 75 rushing yards, 6.3 rushing yards per carry, and 3 rushes of 10-plus yards or more. Kirk Cousins, 19 for 24, 222 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 9.3 yards per attempt, and a 79.2 completion percentage. Bijan Robinson, 19 attempts for 86 rushing yards, 4.5 rushing yards per carry, and 2 rushes of 10-plus yards or more. Darnell Mooney, 9 targets for 5 receptions, 88 receiving yards, 1 touchdown, 17.6 receiving yards per reception. Now, this is what I will say. Yeah, the Cowboys season is really over. Like, the Cowboys are, really, really done. And it sucks because now Dak is probably going to be out for an extended period of time, with reports coming out that he basically tore his hamstring off the bone. The bone, ladies and gentlemen, the bone. That's not good. That is not good at all. If you are a Cowboys fan, I am very sorry for you, but at the same time, I am not sorry for you, simply because your owner / GM / every other title you could possibly think of decided that, you wanted to spend your entire offseason trying to re-sign both Dak and CeeDee Lamb instead of trying to at least make this team a little bit competitive. Just a little bit. Because as of right now, this Cowboys team is not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere for a long time. And, it sucks for Mike McCarthy, because the last 2 seasons, they've been dominant. They've been doing their thing. They were winning a lot of games. They were ultra competitive. The offense was putting up numbers. The defense were doing their thing. But, he's going to be the sacrificial lamb in this. Everyone's going to say, it's Mike McCarthy's fault that the Cowboys are where they are. No, not really. Jerry had an opportunity to get someone like a Derrick Henry. Why? Couldn't afford him. Why? I don't know. The Cowboys of old are gone. Let's just be real here. The time where, Jerry was a little bit aggressive in free agency, and, he was able to use his influence to bring in players and whatnot, that time is past. It's gone. And what you have now is basically a team who is more about glitz and glamour and having primetime games and looking nice in their uniforms, compared to wanting to, be competitive and try to win games and, try to at least make it to the playoffs and maybe even win the Super Bowl. That's just what it is. This Cowboys team could have been very, 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 very competitive, not only in their division, but in the entire league, had they done certain things, 2 or 3 years ago compared to now. You continue to want to take care of your star players. I get that. But at some point, sometimes you have to make certain changes if it means that you have a better chance of not only just winning regular season games, but playing in January and February. And Jerry doesn't want to do that. He doesn't. He wants to continue to have his power over this team. And as long as Jerry Jones has power over the Dallas Cowboys, the Cowboys will not go anywhere. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. He couldn't bring someone like a Bill Belichick or a Mike Vrabel or someone like that. He couldn't do it because why? Those type of coaches, they're going to run things their way or the highway. And they have no problem going somewhere else. They have no problem, sitting out another year. It's no problem for them. And, if we can be real here, this offense is not that good. Zeke at this point just needs to retire. He does. He's lost his burst. He's not that, that same running back to how he was a few years ago. And he has just aged like bananas. Yeah. Those bananas that's in your grandmother's, fruit basket that's in the middle of the kitchen that's been sitting there for about 2 or 3 weeks. Yeah, it's mushy. It's ugly. It got a little smell to it. That's exactly what it is. This offense is not good. And, it sucks. It does, because for the amount of primetime games that the Cowboys get, especially those Thanksgiving games, they need to give that up to somebody else. Let one of these other teams have a slot to play for Thanksgiving, because nobody wants to see these sorry Cowboys continue to get decimated. And it sucks because Dak tried. Dak really does try. He's not a quarterback who is going to point the fingers and say, it's this person's fault, or try to put blame on somebody else or throw somebody under the bus. He's not one of those people. He's someone that he wants to win. He wants to, just do the right thing. And he continues to have to overcome, mountains and hills just because this team is not built to be competitive. Why? Why hasn't this team been competitive? Because of Jerry Jones. Because Jerry Jones decides, hey, I want to prioritize my players instead of trying to bring in some better players that could possibly be much use to us, compared to bringing in players who are at the tail end of their careers, who are most likely going to at the end of this season. Now, moving on to the Commanders and Giants game, which is actually a really good game, believe it or not. So before we get into all the rigmarole with that, let's just get into the stats, okay? So Jaden Daniels was 15 for 22, 209 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 9.5 yards per attempt, and a 68.2 completion percentage. Noah Brown, 6 targets for 5 receptions, 60 receiving yards, 12 receiving yards per reception. Chris Rodriguez, 11 attempts for 52 rushing yards, 4.7 rushing yards per carry, and 1 rush of 10-plus yards or more. Daniel Jones, 20 for 26, 174 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 6.7 yards per attempt, and a 76.9 completion percentage. Malik Neighbors, 11 targets for 9 receptions, 59 receiving yards, 6.6 receiving yards per reception. Tyrone Tracy Jr., 16 attempts for 66 rushing yards, 4.1 rushing yards per reception, and 2 rushes of 10-plus yards or more. Now, as I have always said, and I will continue to say, division games are very hard to predict. And the reason why I say that is because it'll be the team that you think is out of it. They're not going to go anywhere. They're not going to go to the playoffs. They're probably just, trying to see where they fall in the draft and whatnot. That will give you a run for your money. And that's exactly what happened. This Giants team was fighting tooth and nail towards the end with the Commanders. And, of course, the Commanders won. But, you're starting to see a little bit of Danny Dimes, do his thing. You are. But I still think it's not enough. I still think that this offense needs more talent. I still think this offense needs more firepower with their receivers and whatnot. And I just feel like, it's reached a point to where, Daniel Jones is probably playing to fight for his job at this point, because I would not be surprised if the Giants' first pick next year is a quarterback. I would not be surprised because, again, who was it? Brian Dable? It was Brian Dable. Brian Dable wanted Jaden Daniels. He liked Jaden Daniels. Even Joe Shane's son said, You need to get Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is a once in a lifetime type of player. And he decided that he wanted to stick with Daniel Jones. Now, granted, I understand that, you gave him, his deal. So you want to try to, see how things go and whatnot. But, you're in a business of winning. You're not in business, to justify certain contracts. If a player is not playing, up to the standards of the contract that you gave them, then you need to move off of them and you need to be able to figure out what you're going to do moving forward. Because if you don't, what's going to happen is you're going to be in a situation where the team isn't going anywhere and you're basically being dead weight. That's what it is. That's really what it is at this point. If Jaden Daniels was on this Giants team, who knows? Maybe the roles would be switched. Maybe the Giants will be in the Commander's shoes. Who knows? We will never know. But at this point, I feel like the Giants are going to have some very tough decisions that they are going to have to make, once this season is over with. It's reaching a point where some Band-Aids are going to have to get ripped off. Some tough decisions are going to have to be made just for the betterment of the team, just so they can try to be a little bit more competitive, than what they already are at this point. But let's go into the Bears and Cardinals game. So a lot has to be said about this, but I'm going to hold off onto it once I read off the stats, okay? So Kyler Murray was 13 for 20, 154 passing yards, 7.7 yards per attempt, and a 65 completion percentage. James Conner, 18 attempts for 107 rushing yards, 5.9 rushing yards per carry, and 3 rushes of 10-plus yards or more. Trey McBride, 4 targets for 3 receptions, 35 receiving yards, 11.7 receiving yards per reception. Caleb Williams, 22 for 41, 217 passing yards, 5.3 yards per attempt, and a 53.7 completion percentage. DeAndre Swift, 16 attempts for 51 rushing yards, 3.2 rushing yards per carry, and 2 rushes of 10-plus yards or more. Rome Odunze, 7 targets for 5 receptions, 104 receiving yards per reception, and 20.8 receiving yards per reception. Now, this is what I will say. The Bears continue to do Bear things. And what is that exactly, you're probably wondering? It is losing. Losing winnable games, okay? If you would have told me that the Bears would have the amount of talent they have on both sides of the ball, you would think, oh, this team is going to be a playoff team. They have not shown it. They have not played well. They have not been coached well. And clearly it seems like there is some problems going on with how things are going within the locker room and whatnot. Now for the Cardinals, on the other hand, the Cardinals continue to persevere and continue to be competitive despite the lack of talent that they have on both sides of the ball. Kyler Murray has been playing fairly well. He has. He's been playing fairly well. And, when you have, pieces in James Conner and Trey McBride, and then you have Marvin Harrison Jr. as well. And let's be real here. James Conner, since he's been with the Cardinals, has been playing phenomenally well. You haven't heard a whole bunch of injuries and him being out for 2 or 3 games like how he was with the Steelers. And, that's great for him. That's honestly great for him. I can say that as a Steelers fan, I definitely was rooting for James Conner. And sometimes you have to go, in a different environment just so you can really thrive and really show, your skill set. And so far, he's found a home with the Cardinals. Now, Trey McBride continues to show why he is one of the rising stars in this league. He continues to do so. And, since last year, maybe even the year before that, he's been balling. He's been doing his thing, okay? Keep your eye on Trey McBride moving forward. He is definitely, someone that can make a case that he could possibly be a superstar moving forward. Now, for the Bears, back to them. The Bears are just not they're not coached well. They're not. And I would not be surprised if they do clean house completely. Because right now Matt Eberflus is not it. He is not it. And at this point I think Caleb Williams needs an offensive-minded head coach. He needs an adequate offensive coordinator. He needs an adequate offensive staff that is going to help him. Because right now, all he's doing is trying to play hero ball instead of making the routine throws. If you make the routine throws, no one's going to say anything. But if you're always trying to make the big play, the memorable play, the highlight play, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to make it. And, this is somewhat of a roadblock that, a lot of rookies hit. And now Caleb Williams is hitting, and he has to realize that. And, for the defensive side, the defense really hasn't been playing well either. And they got, Montez Sweat and, Jalen Johnson and Tremaine Edmonds and company. Like, this just has not been a good, second half of the season for the Bears. And, if I'm ownership and if I'm management, if I want to make sure that we continue to stay competitive, I have some tough decisions that I have to make, and I have to start creating a board of who I would want to target for offensive coordinator, head coach, and a slew of other, coaching positions. Now, let's get into this Ravens and Broncos game, okay? So, Lamar Jackson was 16 for 19, 280 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 14.7 yards per attempt, and an 84.2 completion percentage. Derrick Henry, 23 attempts for 106 rushing yards, 4.6 rushing yards per carry, 2 touchdowns, and 2 rushes of 10-plus yards or more. Zay Flowers, 6 targets for 5 receptions, 127 receiving yards, 2 touchdowns, and 25.4 receiving yards per reception. Now, Bo Nix, all right, 19 for 33, 223 passing yards, 1 pick, 6.8 yards per attempt, and a 57.6 completion percentage. Cortland Sutton, 10 targets for 7 receptions, 122 receiving yards, 17.4 receiving yards per reception. Javonte Williams, 12 attempts for 42 rushing yards and 3.5 rushing yards per carry. Now, this is what I will say. The Ravens continue to be dominant on the offensive side, but it is the defense that is being an anchor to this team. And, it's not good. It's not good. The amount of talent that is on that defense, they should be just as dominant as the offense is. They should. And, this is a coaching thing. This is not necessarily a lack of talent. They have all the talent in the world. You have Roquan Smith. You have Kyle Hamilton. You have Marlon Humphrey and Nate Wiggins and Nnamdi Metabike and company. You have talent. It is a coaching thing. And, if I am the Ravens, I may have to look into getting a defensive coordinator at this point. Not necessarily firing Zach Orr, but bringing somebody in that knows of how to be a defensive coordinator and how to sort of be creative when it comes to the play calling. Because at this point, this defense will be the Achilles heel on why the Ravens do not go to the Super Bowl. If they do not get their act together by Thanksgiving, we're going to have some tough problems. Because again, doing their thing. They are coming out in games, all cylinders go, beating you in the air, beating you on the ground, just being dominant everywhere on all phases of the offense. It is the defense that just things are clicking. And at some point, when are they going to click? Now, for the Broncos, I understand that the Broncos did lose, but at the same time, these are stepping stones. The reason why I say that is because Bo Nix has to go through the growing pains of being a rookie quarterback in the National Football League, let alone in the AFC. You're going to go through a phase where you're going to be, punched in the mouth by a team like the Ravens. It happens. But for Bo Nix to do what he has done so far definitely says a lot. And it definitely shows that, the Broncos made the right pick in, selecting Bo Nix. Now, for Cortland Sutton, the question is, do you want to stay there and, continue to grow with Bo Nix, or do you want to go somewhere, be competitive, and possibly win the Super Bowl? That is the question. But again, as I've said before, this Broncos team, they're going to be a problem, moving forward, as long as they continue to maintain this path of building, not necessarily overspending for people and reaching for people in the draft and reaching people for trades, but just continuing to maintain consistency and continue to build up yourself piece by piece, brick by brick. That is how you prepare yourself and prepare the roster to be ultra competitive for not just a 1 to 2 year window, but to be competitive for 3 to 5 years or 3 to 10 years. Now, moving on to the Eagles and Jaguars game, okay? Jalen Hurts, 18 for 24, 230 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 9.6 yards per attempt, and a 75 completion percentage. Saquon the Quad God. Barkley, 27 attempts for 159 rushing yards, 5.9 rushing yards per carry, 1 touchdown, and 6 rushes of 10 plus yards or more. Devontae Smith, 6 targets for 4 receptions, 87 receiving yards, 1 touchdown, 21.8 receiving yards per reception. Trevor Lawrence, 16 for 31, 169 passing yards, 2 interceptions, 5.5 yards per attempt, and a 51.6 completion percentage. Travis Etienne, 3 attempts for 24 rushing yards, 8 rushing yards per carry, and 1 rush of 10 plus yards or more. Evan Ingram, 10 targets for 5 receptions, 45 receiving yards, and 9 receiving yards per reception. Now, this is what I will say. This was a game that the Jaguars could have won and beaten the Eagles. And if they did, would we have a different conversation about the Eagles. But again, the recipe for the Eagles to be successful is you give the ball to Saquon. If you give the ball to Saquon, you are more likely to win games. Okay? Because at this point, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the head coach, Sirianni. I don't know if it's the offensive coordinator. But somebody is going to be gone come next season. Somebody is not going to be on this team. And it's looking like more likely it's going to be Sirianni. I don't know what it is. But the Eagles continue to do Eagles things, and they continue to win. And for Saquon to do the move that he did and to jump backwards, come on, man. Come on. He continues to prove that he is one of the best running backs in the league and continues to prove why the Giants made a dumb decision in not re-signing Saquon Barkley. I'm going to leave it there. Not going to go any further. But on the Jaguar side, though, if you're the Jaguars, you probably have some tough decisions that you have to make moving forward. And you have some, you have some decisions that you really have to really think about. Because, this team last year was ultra competitive. They were looking good. They were winning games. They were beating teams. They were doing their thing. But so far this year, Trevor Lawrence looks like a deer in headlights. I don't know what it is. It's not looking good. It's not. And, if I'm the owner, if I'm the GM, I'm probably looking at that contract. And I'm probably thinking to myself, man, maybe we should have never given him that deal. We never should have overpaid him. And granted, I get it. The quarterback market is a little bit higher than what it has been recently. I get all of that. But sometimes it's best to pay a quarterback like a Trevor Lawrence, who you don't really know if he is an elite quarterback or not. You pay him a little bit less so that you are able to surround him with talent, just so you can make things look pretty. Because if you don't, this is what happens. Okay? This Jaguars team, it ain't it. You're not that guy, pal. You're not that guy, pal. Trust me, you're not that guy. Now, on to the Chiefs and Buccaneers game. A lot has to be said about this game, so let's just get into it. So, Patrick Mahomes, 34 for 44, 291 passing yards, 3 touchdowns, 6.6 yards per attempt, and a 77.3 completion percentage. Travis Kelce, 16 targets for 14 receptions, 100 receiving yards, 7.1 receiving yards per reception. Kareem Hunt, 27 attempts for 106 rushing yards, 3.9 rushing yards per carry, 1 touchdown, and 2 rushes of 10 plus yards or more. Baker Mayfield, 23 for 31, 200 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 6.5 yards per attempt, 74.2 completion percentage, folks. 74.2 completion percentage. Baker Mayfield has been doing his thing since being with the Buccaneers, but that's another conversation for another day. Cade Oden, 11 targets for 8 receptions, 77 receiving yards, 1 touchdown, 9.6 receiving yards per reception. Bucky Irvin, 7 attempts for 24 rushing yards, 3.4 rushing yards per carry. Now, this is what I will say. Why in the world would the Buccaneers not try to bring somebody down or to have somebody try to cover Travis Kelce a little bit better? Because there was a drive, I forget which drive it was, where Travis Kelce was basically getting a first down almost every single time. And he was basically running the same route. The same small little route. And he was, boom, get the ball, run a little bit, first down. Boom, get the ball, run a little bit, first down. What are we doing? What are we doing? And granted, I understand that you can't have Levante David, go up against Travis Kelce, because Travis Kelce is going to eat that up. But, I mean, come on, guys. Come on. What are we doing, man? This Buccaneers team, they have their highs and their lows. And, that is expected. But, they are a team that is probably not going to go to the playoffs. But it's not really, it's not really looking that good. It's not looking that good, friend. But the Chiefs continue to do Chiefs things. That's just what it is. The Chiefs continue to do Chiefs things. They continue to be dominant. That defense is starting to come together. D-Hop and Patrick Mahomes are really starting to develop a real connection. And I guarantee you, once they get a lot of their other players back from injury, the Chiefs are going to be on all cylinders. And it's going to be all gas, no brakes. Okay? This team is going to continue to dominate on both sides of the ball. Now, granted, Patrick Mahomes, statistically speaking, this year hasn't had the best season and has been carried by the defense a few games. And that's fine, because they have reached that point in this dynasty to where they are the Patriots, to where a lot of times, Tom Brady in the first half of the season wasn't playing the best. Of course, they were winning games, but they really wasn't playing the best. And, a lot of questions were being asked and whatnot. And then there were some games that the defense was winning them games. And there was other times where, they just made a spectacular play and whatnot. But, that's just what it is with the Chiefs right now. The Chiefs are continuing to do Chiefs things. They continue to defy every and all reasons of why they are undefeated. If you would have told me by now that the Chiefs would be undefeated, still be undefeated, I would have called you a liar. But who knows? Maybe when they go up against a certain team on Christmas Day, maybe they might lose. Who knows? I don't know. Just saying. You heard it from here. Did you really hear it? Who knows? Now, let's get into these trade deadline recaps, because, man, oh man, they got a whole lot of trades, okay? So, start with Zadarius Smith, okay? So, Zadarius was traded to the Lions, as expected by a lot of people. So this is basically what happens. Cleveland receives a 2025 fifth and a 2026 sixth round pick. Detroit receives Zadarius and a 2026 seventh round pick. Now, the Lions have been looking for an adequate pass rusher, and they finally found somebody that is productive, that is still a pass rusher that teams have to be concerned about at this point. Okay? Because let's be real here. The Browns are not going anywhere. They're not going anywhere this season. They're not making it to the playoffs. At this point, they have to prepare themselves for the future. And so what better way to prepare yourself than to get some capital back with a productive player in Zadarius Smith. So, this makes the Lions more competitive once again. Who knows? Maybe they'll try to see if they can make it as far as they can, until Aiden Hutchinson could probably make a late comeback. Who knows? Because again, there were reports that were coming out that, if the Lions made it, I think, to either the NFC Championship or the Super Bowl, there is a chance that Aiden Hutchinson could come back. And you have Hutch and Zadarius Smith on one line? Who knows? Who knows? Now, Khalil Herbert was traded to the Bengals. So Chicago receives a 2025 seventh round pick, and the Bengals, of course, receive Khalil Herbert. Now, this is in part to them losing a running back for the rest of the season. So they just wanted to add, an insurance policy in place. And, this takes Khalil Herbert out of a dysfunctional situation with the Bears and puts him in a position where, the Bengals could probably make it into the playoffs this year. Who knows? Now, on to the most earth-shattering trade in NFL history that has happened. Former Panthers receiver Jonathan Mingo has been traded to the Cowboys. I know, I'm losing my mind right now. I'm going crazy. So, this is what happens, okay? Carolina receives a 2025 fourth-round pick, and Dallas receives Mingo as well as a 2025 seventh-round pick. Now, if you would have told me that the Cowboys would give up a fourth-round pick for Jonathan Mingo, who, believe it or not, he was actually a really good receiver coming out of college. He definitely was. But a fourth-round pick for Mingo? Really? Come on, Cal. What are we doing? What is going on? What is going on in Dallas? Is it the water? Is it the brisket? What is going on? But at the same time, Jonathan Mingo is still on his rookie deal, so that probably maybe had a factor into this trade, but it's another receiver for either Cooper Rush or Trey Lance, because I don't expect Dak to be playing the rest of the season. I don't. Anytime you have anything to basically tear off the bone, yeah, that's not good. All in all, another receiver, another piece, another weapon, somebody that they can definitely throw to, a deep threat, with his size and versatility. Who knows what will happen and how will they use him. Now, on to the big trades, okay? The big dogs, the big fish of the trades, okay? Marshawn Lattimore, former Saints cornerback, has been traded to the Commanders. And I know Commanders fans are probably pausing this right now. And you're probably losing your mind. And you're probably screaming, oh, my God, it's great, it's great, great, great. Oh. Shut up, okay? Just shut up, all right? So, Washington receives Marshawn Lattimore in a 2025 fifth-round pick. New Orleans receives a 2025 third and fourth and a sixth. Now, when we look at this, this is definitely a really good trade for Washington, because they were looking for another corner. And you got one of the best corners, in the league, in Marshawn Lattimore. Have somebody who is able to go one-on-one, mano-a-mano with a number one receiver and hold his own. And that exactly was one of the missing pieces for this Washington defense. So now you have Marshawn Lattimore. This takes them to a whole nother level. I'm telling you guys, this Washington team is not a team that you can sleep on. Okay? I would not be surprised if they try to give him an extension and try to keep him. Because, again, if you have him, Emmanuel Forbes, Mike Sandstrill, Jonathan Allen, Daron Payne, and company on this defense is going to be dominant. And so, kudos to Washington for pulling the trigger on this. Now, for the Saints, you have reached a point where it's time for you to hit the reset button. I'm going to leave that there. We'll get more into that when we talk about gotcha time. Now, the compensation that they got back, from Washington is actually really good, because now that allows them to continue to stock up on draft picks and be able to really build this team that, in the way that they really want to. Now, Mike Williams, yeah, that's right, Mike Will was traded from the Jets to the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's right, the six-time Pittsburgh Steelers. That's right. Omar Khan doing his thing, cooking things up in the kitchen, in the lab, whatever you want to call it, pulls this thing off. So New York gets a 2025 fifth round pick. This is what I will say. You have a big body in Mike Williams. It's somewhat of a matchup nightmare when going up against certain corners, who is able to be a willing blocker, who is able to get those 50-50 balls and be a deep threat, okay? You have him paired with George Pickens, two players who are able to really be the best when it comes to catching those contested catches. Man, oh man, oh man, do we have a problem here. This is another weapon for Russell Wilson / Justin Fields to do their thing. And, with someone like a Mike Williams, they can use him in different ways. You can put him in the slot. You can put him on the outside. The creativity is there, okay? This team is not playing. This team wants to be competitive. This team doesn't just want to win just one playoff game, okay? They're trying to go somewhere, okay? And kudos to Umar Khan. And for all those people that were saying, oh, Omar Khan is starting to look like Kevin Colbert. He's doing the Kevin Colbert thing again. Let me tell you something. Yes, I understand Kevin Colbert wasn't the best towards the end of his tenure. I get all of that. But the fact of the matter is, Kevin Colbert is probably going to be a Hall of Fame GM, one of the best GMs of all time, and he had 2 Super Bowls. He created 2 Super Bowl teams. So before we go and we start comparing people, let's just wait things out, okay? Let's just wait things out. And plus, if you want to say that Omar Khan is Kevin Colbert, well, then that's somewhat of a good thing than a bad thing. Because so far, Omar Khan has hit on a lot of his draft picks. Broderick Jones is still a little bit Don't even get me started with that, because then that's another 2 hours of a whole rant that we'll just go on, but we'll just leave it at there. He's hit well on his draft picks as well as his free agent, signings. He cleaned house with the quarterback room, brought in a competent offensive coordinator, brought in two competent, quarterbacks right now. What exactly has he done wrong? What exactly has he done wrong? And granted, I understand at that time when he traded away Deontay Johnson, I get it. It was uncalled for, it was unnecessary. I get all that, but still. Sometimes you have to whiff on certain decisions, and you try to rewrite your wrongs. And so they did it, and they got Mike Williams. Now, me personally, I would have thought they would have tried to go after D-Hop first, then Mike Williams. But all in all, cannot complain. We got another receiver, so we have another weapon. So kudos to them. Now, on to the other trade that the Pittsburgh Steelers did. The sixth. You know what? I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm just not. The Steelers traded for Preston Smith. Okay, so Green Bay receives a 2025 7th round pick, and of course Pittsburgh receives Preston Smith. Now, this is what I will say. Preston Smith has definitely been a pass rusher that has definitely caught my attention since coming into the league. I remember when he was with Washington, he was doing his thing. He was. And, the reason why that the Packers, let him go for so cheap was because, Preston Smith wasn't really fitting into the system that they're running now, right? So now with the new defensive coordinator that they have, I think they run a 4-3 instead of a 3-4 like how they used to. And so you have somebody in Preston Smith who can play both in and outside linebacker. But in our system, he will play outside linebacker, which is great because you want to try to reduce the snap count for someone like a TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith. Because as of right now, if I'm not mistaken, I don't have the official number with me, but TJ Watt is playing 90+%. That's not even a real stat, but I think it's 92% of the snaps. If you want him to be able to play in the playoffs, you have to be able to reduce the amount of snaps that he's playing, because if you don't, you increase the likelihood of him suffering an injury, and we do not want that at this point. Now, the only thing that I will say about this is, this is sort of the blueprint of what Andy Waddle did when he was with the Eagles. He would have a constant rotation of pass rushers and defensive linemen coming in to continuing to, create constant pressure on the quarterback. And it was successful. And now it's going to, work over here, because now you have a rotation of TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith, and then you have Nick Herbig and then Preston Smith, which is good. Really good. And granted, for the people that say, well, Jeremiah Moon just really wasn't that good. Yes, he wasn't. I view him more as a special teams asset than, a pass rusher. So all in all, great move. I think the only position that I really wanted them to go after was defensive tackle, because, outside of Keanu Benson, you really don't have anybody else that you can really rely on. And the way things are being, worded with Monty Adams, it sounds like he's going to be out for, an extended period of time, maybe even the rest of the season. So you need to bring somebody in to, help with Keanu Benson. And granted, they were able to do that. Now, necessarily, it wasn't the person that I had, personally wanted. I would have preferred maybe, David Gottschall or Calais Campbell or, somebody of that caliber. But, they did what they did. And so, here we are. Now, on to the other trade. Trey White is traded to the Ravens. So the Rams receive a 2026 7th round pick, and Baltimore receives Trey White and a 2027 7th round pick. Now, I don't know really what to say about this, honestly speaking. Me personally, I would have thought the Ravens would have went after a pass rusher because, outside of Kyle Van Noy, they don't have a consistent pass rusher. Odafe Owe is not cutting it. He's not. And there were multiple pass rushers that they could have went after that, if they would have added them to the Ravens, it would have helped them out substantially. Like if they would have tried to get, Azeez Ojulari from the Giants, that's great. That's a great pickup right there. You got a young pass rusher that is having a crazy season so far that, honestly speaking, you probably give him, a small extension, and then it helps both parties. But for them to go after a corner, I don't know. That's a wait and see, type of situation. Now, Khalil Davis, this was the buzzer beater, when it comes to the trade deadline. So Khalil Davis, former, I think, Steelers and, of course, Texans, was traded to the 49ers. So the Texans receive a 2026 7th-round pick. Now, this is what I will say, they definitely needed, a D tackle, and, they finally was able to get somebody. It doesn't necessarily break the bank. It's a depth piece. Nothing more to say. Honestly speaking, there's nothing more to say. Now, there were rumors and, rumblings that they were going to try to see if they could get DeForest Buckner or David Gottschall. Unfortunately, they were unsuccessful in both of them. But, here we are. Maybe the 49ers, start to make a comeback. Who knows? Only time will tell. But it's time for gotcha time. Now, these are just my honest opinions about certain things, certain teams, and where they are. So if you get offended by it, hey, well, then that means that it must be correct then. So here we go. So to start things off, Cowboys need to prepare for the future. Now, the reason why I have this is because, at this point, contracts are starting to become more expensive, and, they just need to begin to prepare for the future, okay? Whether that means you start trading away some people in the offseason, you just let some people just go, you bring in a new regime in, different, culture, whatever the case may be. It's time for them to focus on the future long term because, sure, you locked in Dak and CeeDee Lamb, but we're all forgetting about Michael Parsons. So that right there is going to be somewhat of a difficult process as well because he has been he was playing before he got hurt. He was playing at a pretty good level. So, do they re-sign him? Do they not? What exactly are they going to do with that? Then you have to worry about Zach Martin. You have to worry about D-Law. And then you also have to worry about Trevon Diggs because ever since he's gotten that deal, he hasn't really been playing the best. So, they have a lot of tough decisions that they're going to have to make. And, if you go through somewhat of a soft rebuild instead of like a hard rebuild, you'll be able to bounce back a little bit quicker compared to, going through, this hardcore rebuild where you're not winning any games for like 2 or 3 years straight and, you're just stocking up on a whole bunch of draft picks and everything. Like, the Cowboys don't have to go through that. They just have to address certain parts of the team, bring in adequate coaching, and they will be perfectly fine, okay? The next one, Washington will be a serious playoff contender in the near future. Yes, I believe in that. I am putting all of my money on the table for that. They have everything they need to be successful. Ownership, a stable front office, and a stable head coach. They have stability now in Washington. And now that is going to be a lucrative, spot for a lot of players who are going to be pending free agents to go to. Because now they're winning. They have an adequate offense. They have a good defense, good coaching staff, good front office. Everything is just good. And so that right there is going to bring in the big fish free agents that, that they may want to try to go after. And then not to mention, you have a quarterback on a rookie deal. So you could honestly really build this team up into being a really super dominant team in the next 2 years if they really wanted to. Not to mention, the needs that they have are relatively small and minute, and they could be addressed, fairly split between, the draft and free agency and not have to really break the bank. Now, for the Ravens have an elite offense, but an underperforming defense. Yes, I truly believe it simply because we see time and time again the Ravens defense fail them. Like last night. There was a play where Joe Burrow just threw it straight up to Jamar Chase, and he got in. First play, touchdown. Like, at some point, we have to have a conversation about this Ravens defense. It is underperforming. It is not good. And, coaching does have a big play in this. The coaching for the defense has probably been one of the worst that I've seen, in a very long time. And I'm not saying this as a Ravens fan, but just looking at last night's game against the Bengals, if you eliminate the game, if you eliminate how the game ended and who won and who lost, Joe Burrow's stats and Jamar Chase's stats, phenomenal. Phenomenal. You would have thought that they would have been going up against some Pop Warner football defense. You would have thought so. That's how bad it was. And they have to clean that up and they have to address it now. Now, on the next thing, Joe Burrow will carry the Bengals into the playoffs. Yes. I do believe it simply because Joe Burrow has been playing the best that he has in his entire career so far. And he continues to put this team on his back and win games. Now, maybe the defense will step up a little bit more. Maybe they'll start making some key plays. Who knows? But at this point, Joe Burrow in the playoffs right now is dangerous. He's dangerous against the Chiefs. He's dangerous against the Ravens. He's definitely dangerous against the Steelers. Now, on to the next thing. Steelers do have a real legitimate playoff contending chance since starting Russell Wilson. And that is true because why? Russell Wilson so far has been playing fairly well. And that's no slight to Justin Fields at all, but Russell Wilson has somewhat unlocked another step for this offense, right? George Pickens is doing his thing. Calvin Austin is doing his thing. Van Jefferson is starting to, really start to contribute to the offense. Najee Harris is playing, fairly well. So you have all of that together. This offense is looking really good. And if they continue to keep going with this, and then the defense continues to get better, this team could legitimately make a real playoff run. Okay? Bears, cleaning the entire coaching staff. We did talk about it a little bit, but, for them, the question is, are they going to try to get somebody from the college world? Or are they going to try to get somebody from the NFL, pool? Who exactly would be a good fit for Caleb Williams and this offense? Because, again, this offense has a lot of firepower. You have DJ Moore, you have Rome Odunze, you have DeAndre Swift, you have Cole Kmet, if I'm not mistaken. They have to get an offensive-minded head coach. I understand that the Bears' culture is defense and whatnot, but listen, it is 2024, not 1985. Time to do things a little bit different, okay? Giants need to hit the reset button on the offense. Yes. It is time that you figure out exactly what is the identity of this offense. Because for too long, nobody really knows what is the identity of this offense. And granted, they could have, easily been identified had you kept Saquon, but you didn't want to keep him because you don't value paying running backs that much. Well, now it's backfiring you and it's hurting you. And, outside of Darius Slayton and Tyrone Tracy, what do you really have? What do you really have? Jalen Hyatt, he's been a ghost. He's not been good. Theo Johnson, rising star for sure. But everybody else, I don't know what you really do with it. I really don't. And this is going to take, some serious decision making and some honest conversations that are going to have to be had. Brian Daboll has to be successful with a rookie quarterback. Daniel Jones is not the savior of the Giants. He is not the option. It's time to rip the Band-Aid off. The Saints need to hit the reset button as well. Simply because this Saints team is not good anymore. They continue to go through this, this phase in the offseason where they're, 40 and 50 and 60 million over the cap. And they basically have to restructure everybody's deal just to get under, the cap space regulations and barely do anything to sign all of their rookies and maybe try to go after one or two low-level free agents. And then for the Jets do need to prepare for, Aaron Rodgers' successor. I do think, after this season, I think they do need to have an honest conversation with Aaron Rodgers and say, listen, if you want to stay, you can stay, but we're going to restructure your deal and we are going to draft your successor. Because at this point, you have regressed tremendously, and it's time for us to go in a different direction and prepare for the future. And, another thing that they do need to bring in is an adequate offensive coordinator. They do. Because with the amount of firepower that this offense has, they have been underperforming. And it shows. If you would have told me that an offense that has Garrett Wilson, Malachi Corley, Alan Lazard, Devontae Adams, Braylon Allen, and Breece Hall would be underperforming, I would have called you a liar. Okay? This offense has not been playing well. The offensive line has basically been patched together with baby tape and glue. And, they really have some tough decisions that they're going to have to make moving forward with this offense. Because, again, there's no reason why this Jets team should be, halfway off a cliff with their season. It shouldn't be. But, people making dumb decisions. I think I'll just leave it at that. Now, Jacksonville, as well, they need to figure out what they're going to do with Trevor Lawrence. And, let's be real here. Trevor Lawrence has not lived up to that contract. That contract is going to age like milk. And, it's going to start backfiring on them. In order for Trevor Lawrence to really, truly be successful, they're going to have to surround him with real talent. And granted, they have Brian Thomas. That's a good, starting point right there. But they have other things that they need to figure out moving forward. They probably need to figure out what they're going to do with Doug Peterson. And they also need to figure out what they're going to do with the, coaching staff as a whole. Because this coaching staff on both sides of the ball, it's not cutting it. It is not cutting it. They have to do better. They have to be better with the amount of talent they have on both sides of the ball. And finally, the Browns have tough decisions to make moving forward. And the reason why I say this is because, when we look at this, that whole decision to go after Deshaun Watson was probably one of the worst decisions they could have ever made for their franchise. Because now they're in a situation where you are tied to this player, for whatever the term is of this deal. And, he has been playing well. He has not been playing well. He has underperformed. And, Joe Flacco did more last season with the same players, same offense, same scheme, same everything, did more than what Deshaun Watson has ever done for the Browns. And mind you, they got more pieces for Deshaun Watson just so he can be more successful. And he still hasn't done anything. At this point, I think they have to consider, possibly drafting a quarterback. Now, I'm not saying that has to be their first pick, but they probably do need to get a quarterback in and, have them sit and learn possibly and maybe just, become a sponge for maybe the first 2 or 3 years and then figure out what you have in them. Because, again, this Browns offense is not good. I mean, granted, they traded away Amari Cooper and, they paid Jerry Jeudy. This offense is not good. This team is not good. This team is not going to go anywhere. They are wasting talent on both sides of the ball. And you can tell that, some people are probably going to lose their jobs, with this whole decision for Deshaun Watson. So I'm going to end this here. An hour and 14 minutes. Man, I gave you guys a banger of an episode. But if you guys like what you are listening, please like, share, subscribe, turn the notification bell on, leave a 5-star review wherever you listen to the Football Junkies podcast. Leave a review. Please leave a review. Download the episodes so that I can be able to give you guys the fix that you guys need. So as always, I hope I gave you guys the fix that you guys need. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys so much. For my YouTube people, Football Junkies Pod, okay? Football Junkies Pod. Now, when you go on the YouTube, if you click in the bio, there is a Linktree link there. You click on that, and that will take you to all the other places that we have Football Junkies content, okay? Whether that be the Instagram, the TikTok, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. I know I'm drawing the blank here. RSS feed, and anywhere else that you can get the Football Junkies podcast, okay? Now, Instagram, Football_Junkies Pod, okay? Football_Junkies Pod. Football_Junkies Pod. Junkies Pod is not what? It is together, not spaced. It is together, not spaced. Football_Junkies Pod. Junkies Pod is together, not space. For my TikTok people, Football Junkies Pod, okay? Football Junkies Pod. You click on that link, it'll take you directly to the YouTube. I'm going to try to see if we can add in more links as well. I know I have a whole bunch of clips that I have to give you guys, so I'll probably be doing that this entire weekend while we watch the 6 time. You know what? I'm not going to do it. Not going to do it. Not going to do it. I'll save that for after Sunday's game. But as always, I hope I gave you guys the fix that you guys need. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys so much. Stay strong, stay positive, drink some water, go outside, go on a walk, do something, watch some football. And as always, peace, love, all those great things and more. I'm out.